Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And in this video, we're talking about joint health and joint longevity. What keeps our joints healthy and why degeneration occurs, how movement and aging affect our joints. In order to answer all those questions, we need to dive into the physiology of the synovial joints. So let's go. First of all, what are the synovial joints? So guys, synovial joints are all the movable joints in the body, your shoulders, your knees, your wrists. That's basically a place where two bones come together. The ends of the bones are covered with the cartilage. There is a capsule that envelops those two ends of the bones, and there is a fluid inside. There are different types of synovial joints in the body. There are ball and socket joints like your shoulders and hips. There are hinge joints like your elbows and knees. But we're not talking necessarily about the structure, but physiology, about the processes that occur inside the joint as we move. What is cartilage? Cartilage is a strong and flexible connective tissue, and it's found throughout the body, particularly in our joints. We call this articular cartilage or hyaline cartilage. It gets its name from the Greek word hyalos, which means glass. It's because it's translucent, it's smooth and shiny, it's glass-like, it provides structural support, and it provides cushioning inside the joints. Cartilage is avascular. It doesn't have blood supply. It means there's no blood vessels coming in to give it nutrients. So what keeps the cartilage healthy? What protects it from degeneration? Where is the cartilage getting nutrients from? The answer to all this is synovial fluid. What is synovial fluid? It's a lubricating fluid that exists inside the joint cavity. It is an ultrafiltrate of blood plasma, and that's basically 85 to 90% water. Synovial fluid also contains blood proteins, nutrients, enzymes, and they're all working together to nourish the cartilage, to keep it healthy. So guys, joint capsule is basically the connective tissue that surrounds two ends of the bone, that keeps them together. The joint capsule has two layers. Outer layer that is fibrous, is made from collagen, so provides stability, but at the same time allows movement in those synovial joints. It has nerve endings, but it doesn't have any blood supply, and it's abundant with receptors. It's basically our organ of proprioception. So when you move the joint, the nerve endings in this fibrous layer will be sending afferent signals to the brain to provide information about the position of the joint. However, that means that there will be also signals of pain if the tissue is damaged. There's also inner layer of the joint capsule called synovium or synovial layer, and that is the layer that produces synovial fluid. It does have blood supply, but it doesn't have nerve endings. So the synovial layer is made from two types of cells, type A and type B. Type A synoviocytes, that's your cleanup crew. Those are macrophage-like cells, also immune cells that deal with any debris, any waste products, any microbes, infections, and they basically keep your joint cavity healthy. Type B cells, synoviocytes, this is the fluid factory. Those are the cells that produce the fluid, specifically hyaluronic acid or hyaluronan, as well as lubricin. Let's talk about those two substances. Hyaluronan, it's large viscous polymer. And large is important because this molecular weight will then influence the quality of the fluid. It makes the synovial fluid highly viscous. Viscosity is basically a property of the fluid that makes it resistant to flow. What's viscous? If you ever touched egg white, just imagine how slippery, how sticky and slippery at the same time it is. That's how synovial fluid roughly is. And hyaluronan absorbs mechanical shock and provides elasticity to the joint, but it also acts as a dam. In fact, hyaluronan prevents or determines how much fluid escapes joint cavity to the surrounding tissues. And this is because this is a large molecule. It's highly hydrophilic, so it loves water. It binds with water and determines osmotic resistance. So in other words, hyaluronan, it helps the joint hold on to the fluid reserve in the first place. You may have heard of hyaluronic acid that is added to pretty much all anti-aging creams, face creams particularly, because it helps us to hold on to water, so it can help your skin look more nourished, healthier, and more elastic as well. Okay, so now we're going to get a little bit nerdy. Outflow buffering. When there is a load on the joint, the pressure in the joint cavity increases, and that increase in pressure would push the fluid out. So when pressure forces the fluid out of the joint cavity, water will pass through the synovial membrane, water will come out, but hyaluronan stays inside because it's just too big to be pushed through the membrane, and it's sieved behind, simply stays inside the joint cavity. Concentrated hyaluronan inside the joint will draw the water back in. So this high local osmotic pressure opposes further fluid loss and drives water back into the joint cavity. So less hyaluronan doesn't just mean worse lubrication, it also means that the joint leaks out that nourishing vital fluid faster. So this is quite essential to what we're going to talk about later about aging and the generation of the joint. Lubricin is also released for slickness. This is a glycoprotein and it coats the surface of the cartilage, and it's responsible for boundary lubrication, helps with creating thin film of protection to separate those two surfaces. It prevents cartilaginous surfaces from touching each other and creating friction. Bear in mind, cells of the cartilage called chondrocytes that sit at the very top of that cartilaginous layer, they also release lubricin. So it makes the cartilage very, very slippery. How important is that for smooth movement? So imagine if the cartilage is degenerating, it's wearing off, the ability of chondrocytes to release lubricin will also diminish. Let's discuss how movement affects the joint health, joint longevity. Cartilage directly participates in that process of the circulation of the synovial fluid. Cartilage is porous. So cartilage can actually, like a sponge, can hold on to synovial fluid. It basically stores the fluid. How this is linked to the motion is that when you put pressure on the joint, cartilage will be literally like a rigged out sponge and the fluid will be squeezed out of the cartilage. That's exudation. It means that the synovial fluid simply moves from the cartilage through the pores into the joint cavity, giving, again, more lubrication inside between the cartilaginous surfaces. When you offload the joint and the fluid goes and hides in the cartilage, that's imbibition. And guys, faster gait, walking faster versus walking slower, it will create that sort of pumping effect, right? You fill the sponge, you rig out the sponge. And in that way, you've got that pumping of fluid constantly. That's why movement is so beneficial. The movement stimulates the fluid factory in a synovium. It helps us produce the fluid, replace the fluid, circulate the fluid inside the joint cavity so it reaches all or parts of the joint, but also it nourishes other structures, not just the cartilage, but also intra-articular structures like labrum or meniscus. Now, let me tell you about the study on the rabbit's knees. There was a group of researchers that were working on rabbit's knees and testing how movement can influence the hyaluronan production. So they had a group of rabbits and they would be moving their knees into flexion extension for 3 minutes, then break for 12 minutes, and they were doing this for 5 hours versus the other group of rabbits that they were just static, they didn't do anything to them. And they compared at the end the amount of hyaluronan in the synovial fluid. The result was that this stimulus nearly doubled synovial fluid production in the knee joints of the rabbits that were tested, but also pretty much half the time in which it takes to replace the fluid and the hyaluronan in the synovial fluid. So moving the joints doesn't just make more lubricant, but it refreshes the lubricant nearly twice as fast. The movement wasn't a grinding, continuous stress on the joint. It was intermittent, low impact activity through the range of motion of the joint in short, repeated bouts. So when it comes to movement and joint longevity and kind of joint health, moving rhythmically through full range of motion, cyclically, intermittently is better strategy than not moving at all, being sedentary, where you basically have a stagnation in a joint cavity. That fluid is not getting refreshed very fast. That means also that nutrients do not enter the cartilage as frequently. While where you're moving so much when the load is constant and grinding, that may also not be the wisest. High impact may also be a little bit harsher on the cartilage, And our joints basically love when there is loading, offloading. So think of bending, rotating, flowing. I like to use this analogy of spreading butter, right? So if you imagine that you put a little bit of butter at the top of the joint or one bone, and you want to distribute it effectively against the other surface, you would want to move the bones in different ways, right? Not just in one direction. You want nice cyclic movement to spread the butter everywhere. Okay, and finally, we're getting to that most interesting and most pertinent aspect when it comes to joint health. What is happening to our synovial fluid, our cartilage, our joints with time? And I'm sorry to say, but synovial fluid volume and viscosity diminish with age. So we've got less hyaluronic acid. That means we've got reduced lubrication and nutrient delivery. And that is a major contributor to osteoarthritis. Okay, guys, I'm going to throw a few numbers when it comes to aging and loss of hyaluronan, okay? So high molecular weight hyaluronan, the most lubricating form of hyaluronan, it declines roughly 9.4% per decade. And if you already have smaller and less effective hyaluronan fragments in your synovial fluid, they will decline even faster, up to 13% per decade. So it's not just less lubrication or less lubricant, it's literally proportionally worse quality lubricant. We can't stop aging. Things will be changing in our body and we need to accept it, but there are also things we can do. Because remember, guys, the movements that I've recommended in my episodes of Joint Care series, it's not strategy for performance, or strength. This is basically joint hygiene protocol. Okay. It's like brushing your teeth. You should be doing it daily to keep your joints nourished, healthy. This is about fluid dynamics, right? That's what osteopaths are so known for. Fluid dynamics, it means fluid is moving, blood is moving, synovial fluid is moving, lymph is moving. We basically want to beat stagnation. You don't want stagnation anywhere in your body, right? You don't want blockages in your body, be it your veins or ducts. Guys, I will leave you with this advice. Motion is lotion, so move. Use any pockets of time, whether you waiting for the train, whether you're brushing your teeth, take frequent breaks to move so you prevent stagnation occurring. You want to move all your joints. You want to move them in directions they are built to be moved. So if it's your ball and socket joints, you got to rotate it and move it through its full range of motion. And I know a lot of people stress about programming and protocols and so on, but you don't need elaborate routine. In terms of joint health and joint care specifically, you need specific movements, circular movements, rotational movements, frequent movement, low impact, cyclic, rhythmic. I've dove into this topic because that really highlights how important movement is. And hopefully it will inspire you or motivate you or maybe force you in a way to think about movement and, times where you're sedentary and you don't feel like training, that doing something, a little bit of movement, a little circle, or simply standing up and moving your joints and walking around, taking frequent, faster paced walks, how important it is, right? You don't need to always go and lift heavy weights and get your heart rate up. I mean, yes, there are obviously other tissues in the body. There are bones that need to be loaded and stressed. There's cardiovascular the metabolic system, right? There's our heart and our lungs and our mitochondria that we want to train. And there's obviously resistance training. We want strong muscles. There's also control training and balance and coordination. There's so many things. But guys, at the end of the day, you cannot make gains in hypertrophy or balance or VO2 max if your joints are hurting. So to me, daily movement it's non-negotiable. Anyway, that's all I've got for you for this video. So please, if you want to take care of your shoulders and hips, please refer to my joint care series. I'll be making more videos showing you how to, take care of your knees, your back, ankles, and so on. If you enjoyed this video, if you learned something, give it a like, subscribe, share with someone who may benefit, and I will see you in the next videos. Ciao.